My name is Schmidt. We're here with Edwin Martinis. It's August 24th, 2022. We're at Mitchell Wine Group in Portland. Edwin, thank you so much for joining us today. And the first question to get you started is why wine?
Why wine? Wine I fell into. It wasn't a set path for me. I was a teacher and a coach at Western Oregon University, and I had one of my kids, a defensive end, was always working. He had a cell phone. And I was just like, Lance, what is it that you're doing? Because you have to think that was 1998, 1999, or maybe 2000, and people didn't really have cell phones. And so it kind of stood out to me. We'd be going to a game, and he'd be answering his phone and calling people. And I just sat down on the bus next to him one day and said, "What are you doing?" "We're getting ready to play a football game." He's like, "Oh, I'm working. I'm selling wine." I'm like, "Okay, well, put the phone away and we'll talk about this later." And I went and talked to him later. He's like, "Yeah, I sell wine for a winery called Untitled Vineyards, and I go to stores and restaurants and I sell wine. Why don't you come by my house? I'll show you the wine." I'm like, "Okay." I go to his house, and like any college house, I mean, at least in my experience, you've got way too many guys or girls living in too small of a space, and he's living in the garage, right? And he has taken racking and racked the whole outside of the garage. His bed's in the middle, and he's got thousands or tens of thousands of dollars worth of wine in a college house. And I was just fascinated. And then he said, "Well, do you want to go out and see what I do?" And I went out and I worked with him, and we went around and we sold wine. And fast forward a few months, and he gets an opportunity to go play Arena League football. And of course, I'm just kind of intrigued by this business that he has kind of created, and he needs someone to cover his route while he goes and tries out for Arena League football. And he says, "Hey, coach, would you mind covering my route? So when I come back, I can come back to my job." I said, "Sure," because we were going into summer, spring ball, everything's over. I have this space of time when you teach that you can, for the lack of a better words, double dip a little and work. I did it, and I loved it. And what really hooked me, though, is I'd never made that much money before. And so from then on, I not only kind of fell in love with the product, but I also fell in love with the process. Mm-hmm. And he came back. He got his job back. I got ready to go back to school, get my couple of my classes and my assignment for football. And all of a sudden, I get a ring from Willamette Valley Vineyards. "Hey, would you mind come and interview for a job selling wine for us in Beaverton?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll come interview." I interview. They offer me the job. I saw how much money I made. I go back to the school. I say, "Hey, I'd really like to stay teaching and coaching because this is what I want to do. I need to make X amount of dollars." And they're like, "Well, sorry, Edwin, we can't do that for you." And that's how I got in the wine business.
It's amazing. All right, so we're going to come back to that in a second, but let's talk about kind of life before that. Tell me about how you ended up coaching and teaching at Western.
Coaches and teachers were always mentors to me growing up, and so that's what I went to school for. I wanted to play football. I enjoyed sports, and so I was able to play at Western Oregon because they would accept me onto the team. I wasn't a D1 athlete being recruited out of high school with lots of scholarships. So that's where I ended up, and it was at Teaching Liberal Arts College. And so I did my undergraduate to get my degree in teaching education with a minor in health ed. And when I got done playing and got done with my undergraduate, I was offered a position as a graduate assistant that they would put me through a master's program if I would work on the football team. Mm-hmm. And so, there was a little bit of time in between. I left school because I thought, "Oh, I'm done with school. I'm going to go out and get a job." I went out and got a job, and I was like, "I don't like working." I mean, really, I was like, I sold cars, and I just was like, is this really what I set out to do? And I was like, no, I want to be a teacher. And so that's how I kind of figured out. I went back to the university, and that's when got presented that opportunity. I did that for, I don't know, a year and a half, and then I was hired by the university because it took a year and a half to get my graduate degree. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed the graduate part of education. The undergraduate part was more of a vehicle to get to be a kid and have the college experience. And so that kind of set me into more of a professional, mindset of, being excellent at something. Was kind of that postgraduate education, because I really got to focus on what I was interested in. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of led me to, a strange path, but to being in the wine business.
And before coming to Western, tell me about growing up.
Grew up in McMinnville, Oregon, which for all intents and purposes makes me a little bit of a unicorn in the Oregon wine business. A lot of people that are in the Oregon wine business are not from here, and especially not from McMinnville, we're the hub, McMinnville, Dundee, wine country area. And so people are always very surprised that I'm from there. But again, McMinnville, when I was growing up, was a rural community. It was based in agriculture, and we had a steel mill. I mean, those were the two municipalities, right? So if you were going to stay in McMinnville, agriculture, municipalities, or you're going to go to work for the steel mill, or you're going to travel up to Portland. And that was really the majority of the opportunity there. And so that's, that was my childhood was just very Americana, it's just parents and sports and working, doing, odd jobs here and there when I got the opportunity.
So tell me about you mentioned kind of coming back into the school and doing master's program, coaching. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your experiences in coaching and teaching. What did you enjoy about that time of your life?
I mean, it was kind of doing what I was drawn to, right? Giving back what I was given, and seeing the change in people and building teams, and seeing that you can go from here to here with a plan, right? There's a process to it, and that is what I really enjoyed about it. Seeing that change from, hey, we may not be so good today, but if we do all this stuff, then we can get to being great. Mm-hmm. And that to me was the attraction mm-hmm. to it. Mm-hmm. You can really change perception in individuals through teaching and coaching. And it really does dovetail into the business world too. It's really no different. There might be just different steps in the journey. People learn in many different ways. So I like that part of it too. Every single person has a different way of absorbing information, and then being able to output it. And that to me was always really fascinating. It's actually what I did my thesis on, was multi-level learning in the classroom, where you have curriculum and the teacher teaches the same thing to 35 kids, and you have this demographic of people that get it, right? It's kind of for them. You have another part that gets left behind, and then you also have the advanced learners that they're kind of just being stagnated, where they can actually perform above and beyond what the expectations are. So why have just, teachers need to have the ability to evaluate their classroom and teach to the individual, but get the same content across to everybody.
Are there moments, games, people from that time that you're particularly proud of or think back fondly on?
Oh man, I just think all of the people that mentored and coached me, they all gave me bits and pieces of who they are. don't think I can just make one or two people out. I don't think that would be fair, because even the people that don't provide you with positive influence, they provided you with maybe what not to do.
So you mentioned you're intrigued by wine, and you have this kind of trial run where you have your own route for a little while, and then you're brought back into the fold full time. So tell me about that point in your life, leaving teaching, coaching for at least for the moment, going into wine. What were you kind of thinking at that point, and what was your initial impression as you started to learn the job and learn the industry?
It was hard to leave coaching and teaching. But the money part is really what just kind of sealed the deal. Also, at the time, my now wife, at the time she was my girlfriend, was like, how long are you going to do this teaching and coaching thing? Because she saw that the path was you had to move and to advance your career, and that just was not in the cards for us. It really wasn't in the cards for me either. I'm not someone who likes to move around. And so I was able to rationalize that between making a better living and maybe a better kind of quality of life as I proceeded in my career. But I never looked back. I got into the wine business, and I immediately fell in love with wine and all of the different kinds of wine. It wasn't just Oregon wine. I mean, Oregon wine was the first thing that I was introduced to, and I feel fortunate to have been at a winery first, so I could see how the wine is made. Mm-hmm. I can see how the fruit is grown. I can see how the wine was sold. I could see it for direct to consumer. I could see it to wholesale and even international sales, and all the different channels, right? Because the winery has to do all of those things, right? So from inception to conception, I got to experience that, and it was really the wine that captured me. In food, like wine with food, I just think it's one of the great pleasures in life. I just dove into the education of how wine was made and how it tasted and the quality of it and how to discern all of that, because when I was growing up, wine was just a celebratory beverage. I had one side of the family that it was a celebratory beverage, and then one side of the family that it was taboo. So it just depended on whose house we were having the party at, or whether or not there was wine. So to me, wine was not. Was it taboo? Was it celebratory? I don't know. And as I got into the wine business, I understood. It's not just a celebratory beverage. It's not taboo. It's actually one of the great pleasures in life. And then once I went on that journey, and I traveled quite a bit through distribution, because that allows you to do that. People want you to go and see the places in Italy, France, and Spain. Then I started, my interest started to change more towards the business end of things. And I'm still on that journey. Like, I feel like I'm in the beginning of that journey on understanding the business side of wine. I think that if you are going to do one or the other, you kind of got to specialize in one or the other, because the depth of knowledge to really be an expert in wine and the depth of knowledge to be the expert in business, they're two different paths. And I've just found myself going more towards the business end of it. And it's interesting, if you don't flex one of those muscles, one atrophies. So I feel like I almost know less about wine today than I did, 7 or 8 years ago, or even the year before, because it's not a muscle that I flex as often as I used to.
Tell me about your process of learning wine, both of the wines of the world and of all of the kind of the terminology, regions, varietals, things you had to know to converse with people about wine.
I mean, I had to learn how to pronounce, how to say it all. That I would have to say that was probably, and still is, one of the most challenging pieces about knowing wine, is just how to pronounce it. Is it really important that you pronounce it correctly? I mean, yes and no. I think it's just mostly important that you know what you like about wine. Whether it's from Oregon or France or Italy, and be able to educate people on that if you're on our side of the business. How do you communicate to all different kinds of wine buyers? And so that was the journey you go on, right? So some people, it's important that you know how to explain how to say the wine, and some people it's really important to know everything about the producer. Some people it's just really important that you're educating on them what their consumer wants. And if you can kind of do all of that, that's kind of that journey on the wine side. On the business side, it's I would say it's a little bit more science, as where the wine part is a little bit more art. And on the business side, there's just a lot of process to things. And I'm one that finds comfort in process. And so it's really more of a traditional learning environment. You've got to read, and you have to spend time with people who know a lot more than you. And then you have to try to do it, and you have to fail. And sometimes you fail more than you succeed. And that's what I'm kind of finding on the business end versus the learning path on the wine end, is where it's more art and science.
So as you're learning this in the early days, especially learning wine, and what did you learn about selling wine? Is there anything unique about wine as something to sell versus something else you might sell? And what did you find were kind of successful strategies as you were getting going?
I like that question. I've sold from a young age. As a kid, I sold to the kids at school. I sold printers, copiers, fax machines. I sold cars. I've sold the university because I was part of the recruiting at the university during my time there. And I sold grapes, which is kind of what gets us here today. And then I've sold wine. And the common theme, I think, between no matter what you're selling is that you're providing value to the people that you're selling to. And that is almost, it's in step with, can you establish a relationship with them? And doesn't always have to be a friendship relationship, but you have to establish a relationship that works for both parties. And if you can just do those couple of things, provide value and establish a relationship that both people value, then you are mutually benefiting each other, because it's never a one-sided deal.
So take us through kind of the path for you. You started back at Threemile Vineyards. How long were you there, and what was the role you had there?
So I started at Willamette Valley Vineyards as a drive sell. What that means is I didn't have delivery. I had my mom's minivan. It was a Nissan Quest, because that was the largest vehicle that I had in my atmosphere at the time. And I would drive to the warehouse, get wine, drive to the retailer, or to whether it was a big box retailer like Fred Meyer or a small wine shop. I would walk in the front door. I would show my wines, and I'd drive around the back and make the delivery. Write the invoice and make the delivery, make the deposit, turn in the deposit slip. That's how I started. And then throughout my iteration there, I was there from 02 to 09 or 010. Gets a little fuzzy, somewhere around in there. I had a couple of different jobs. I finally got delivery, so then I was just a salesperson. And then I had some brand management responsibilities after a while. And then I had general management responsibilities towards the end. And so I kind of did the gambit of the jobs while I was there.
Tell me about the progression for you. When you made those kinds of moves, did you feel ready? Did you feel comfortable? Were you excited to take the next step forward?
Yes. I would say that I'm a calculated risk taker, and I'm always looking to see how can I improve, and so what is the next step? How do I get to the next step? And I think when I went from kind of sales brand management to general management, I was not ready. I was not ready for the people management side of things. It's a big leap going from managing a few people to managing multiple different personalities and different units of the business, whether it's warehouse or whether it's purchasing or whether it's the sales team or it's the suppliers. I was not ready for that, but I don't know who is, right? At some point, you just have to go for it and make the mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And I think even during that tenure at Willamette Valley Vineyards, I was even selling for Willamette Valley Vineyards at the national level. So I did some national level sales. And one of the things I guess I didn't go over is we also had a distribution arm, because at the time, Willamette Valley Vineyards was self-distributed winery. And to think that now, I mean, they make over 100,000 cases of wine. And I think at the time they were making a little bit less than 100,000 cases of wine, all self-distributed. Right?
That's crazy.
It was awesome. it was like, I call it the other Willamette University that's in Salem. You just go there and you learn, you sink, you swim, and that's the culture. And I couldn't have found a better place that fits my personality. And so I would have to say that I give Jim Bernot quite a bit of credit for that, and another guy named Mike Kins, which you guys probably interviewed him. He was our general manager at the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were kind of probably the two people during that first part of my career that were allowed me to grow. Mm-hmm. A lot of places don't allow you to grow, and I will say if you work in that environment, that's what they're allowing you to do. A lot of places kind of put you in a spot, and that's what you do, and it's really performance based and how high can you go.
You've brought up a couple of times the importance of sort of making mistakes and learning from them. Were there sort of notable mistakes for you or notable things for you that kind of you learned from or kind of changed your path as you were going through them?
Notable mistakes. I would say that I tend to stick with things too long that aren't working. And I've repeated that mistake. I'm still repeating that mistake because sometimes, man, they hit, right? One time we tried to distribute beer. We were a wine distributor, and that did not work. That was a lesson learned. Hiring people and working with people, I've made a lot of mistakes there with people management, mm-hmm. and that has been. I think that will be a lifelong, learning of success and failures. Mm-hmm.
So after Willamette Valley Vineyards, what came next?
I went to work for Southern Wine and Spirits. Southern Wine and Spirits is almost the polar opposite of Willamette Valley Vineyards. It is the largest wholesaler of wine and spirits. It is a incredibly efficient machine. There, everyone has a job, and there's a process, and that's how it's done. Southern Wine and Spirits had purchased a fine wine wholesaler in Washington, and called Cavatappi, and they wanted to open up that same type of a fine wine distributor in the state of Oregon. And so I left Bacchus, Willamette Valley Vineyards, to help start that at Southern Wine and Spirits. And I did that for 3.5 years until 2014. And yeah, that was the next step. And that's where it was a massive learning experience, mostly in operations on how to get wine from point A to point B. They're incredible at that. And that was a massive education.
What caused that to be the thing that took you away from Bacchus, and what were the biggest sort of things you learned in that next step?
Yeah, when I left Bacchus, we were in the process of shutting that business down because Willamette Valley Vineyards was going to go into distribution at the time. So we had grown it large enough in the state of Oregon where we could get regional distribution. And I saw that, and I was part of helping kind of slow the business down, work on getting the inventory under control, and the Southern Wine and Spirits opportunity came available, and I saw that I could go to a leading distributor. I could start something that was new and exciting and fine wine oriented, but also with the structure of Southern Wine and Spirits. It was something that we lacked at Willamette Valley Vineyards, and Willamette Valley Vineyards made the same choice, right? They were lacking that, infrastructure to really be a viable distribution company. And so I saw that opportunity not only to stay in fine wine, but also have the infrastructure and learn a part of the business that I didn't really understand.
Mm-hmm. So what were the biggest things then that you took away from that time?
That structure breeds success. That if you have rules and policy and procedure that aren't inhibiting, it actually breeds success. I also learned that if it is too rigid, that it inhibits certain strategies. So if you're trying to be a true fine wine distributor, if it is too rigid, you cannot provide the service that's needed for what the customer needs. Mm-hmm. But you cannot service volume and grocery and be loose. Those were the two things that I learned really quickly.
So what was your role within the organization?
To help build Cavatappi. So if you look at the larger companies, they have silos, right? So you'll have different divisions within the company because they're too large to have like one sales department. Mm-hmm. And so it was myself and two other people were to build the portfolio, build the account base, and then go to market. That was my role within the business, that business unit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Within that, I'm particularly curious about building a portfolio. You're starting from scratch, and you have obviously a great deal of means. So how do you go about building a portfolio from scratch?
You take the current relationships that you do have, and so Willamette Valley Vineyards, Bacchus was kind of shutting that down. So there were a bunch of people who didn't have homes. They needed a home. So that was I would call that the base. And then Southern also has wines within their current portfolio that need that higher touch from the sales and marketing side. And so we culled some of that from Southern Wine and Spirits, and we culled some that needed homes, and that's how you build a portfolio. It's not as easy as that, right? Because there's people behind these brands that need to feel comfortable with their distribution company. And so there's a very relationship heavy part to that, right? So if you're a distribution company and someone says, oh, hey, we're starting this new silo, and oh, this is your new point of contact, there's a little bit of either joy or hesitation, right? And so you kind of work through that on the back end. And that's how you do it. It's not much more complicated than that.
Did you find at that time that you were you seeking out, as you're seeking out like newer clients or newer wine clients, were you looking for wineries, looking for that, or was it most of it coming to you, drawn to you as for what you could offer them?
In the beginning, it's us going to them. Mm-hmm. And then once you build a reputation, then that flips. Then they start coming to you.
So what came next for you then after that?
I mentioned Mike Kins. Mike Kins was the general manager at Mitchell Wine Group. And he decided to go from wholesale distribution and go to David Hill Winery out in Forest Grove. And he recommend that I interview for his position. So he called me and asked if I would meet with David Brown, the owner. And I said, sure, I'll meet with David Brown, the owner. And I came and I met David, and I just was impressed by his vision. So if you think about my experience with Bacchus and building that company and being there from the beginning till the end, I did have some hesitation going to a smaller company. Mm-hmm. Southern Wine and Spirits is a very good company. It's a very safe company, and they're always going to be around. But that was part of what was making me look on the other side of the fence. Was I really going to build my career and have a quality life work relationship at Southern Wine and Spirits? Most likely not. I wasn't really going to really build something. I was maybe selling something for them, but really building something and building a team. And when I met David, I was like, well, you got to promise me a few things. You can't sell the company. You can't shut the company down. And you promised me those two things. If you're telling me what your vision is and that's what we're going to do, that is also my vision. And that's what brought me here. David has stayed true to that. And so now where are we now? 8 years later?
Describe that sort of initial vision for us and what your role was going to be in it.
My initial role was to come in, evaluate the situation, and then make David's recommendation to get to the vision. The vision is still what it is today, is to build the best fine wine wholesaler in the state of Oregon. We've expanded that a little bit we'd like to be regional to the Northwest. So aspirations have grown a little since then, and doing it a little differently. Over my experience in the other two distribution models, I was always torn between the distributor and the supplier relationship, that they were always at odds. Why is the distributor and the winery always kind of at odds? We're really had the same goal, right? To get the wine out to the people and make some money in the process. And I wanted to fix that. And by having a collaborative relationship, so it's a little bit more of a sales and marketing relationship rather than just a fulfillment and distribution relationship. And setting goals and reviewing them and, knowing why things are working and why they're not working, rather than, hey, we sell your wine and that's what we do for you. That was our vision. Mm-hmm. Another part of it was creating an experience. We're not just a logistics company, right? I mean, distribution is a logistics company. It's a warehousing and logistics company. That's not what I wanted to do. That's not what David wanted to do. There's a whole world of wine, right? There's food, there's events, there's experiences. I personally believe, as does David, that wine makes people's lives better. Why can't we provide that experience? It just happens that we also have to get the wine there, right? Now, not everybody wants that experience, right? Some people just want the service, right? Good, consistent service. But some people also want that complete experience. And that's what keeps this fun. And the other thing was to have just the best portfolio, not just be the best distributor, but have the best portfolio. So really curate wines that people want, right? And not just have wines that are popular, right? Understand how to build a brand, understand how to elevate a brand that needs elevation through distribution, and maintain that relationship, that balance between the supplier and the distributor. And that is the vision.
So number of questions from that. I want to start by building a team, and you mentioned that was it's been part of your process and part of the kind of ongoing evolution for yourself. Tell me about building a team here. With that being your goal, what were you looking for as you started building a team, and what were the sort of the initial goals as you were doing that?
When I started building the team, it is you have certain functional areas that you have to fulfill, right? So building out the organizational chart of the company and saying, this is what we need, this is what we have, these are the people that we can elevate to the positions that we need, and we need to hire for that. So that's the beginning of the process, and then after that, it's the traditional, start interviewing and talking to folks, and recruiting people that fit your culture. And for me, when you start building the team, it's all about the culture, right? Yes, they need to have the skill set, but they also have to be willing to learn. They have to be willing to teach. They have to be willing to lead. They have to be willing to coach. They have to be willing to get their hands dirty. All the while, you got to have a positive attitude. And when you're growing a business like we did with Mitchell, that is the main focus. What positions do we need, and who fits that culture? And then over the years, it becomes just education, teaching, coaching, and staying aware of the positions that you need as the business grows, because it rapidly changes. And to me, it's exciting, right? We've had multiple people come up through the business over the years, and we brought in a lot of really great people. And to watch them start to meld together as a team and not really need me is really the reward, right? That you're watching them accelerate, and to me, that's the fun business side of building a team.
You talked about building a more collaborative relationship with the winery clients. Obviously, we've done a lot of these interviews. We've talked to a lot of people who had a lot of grumblings about distribution and a lot of frustration. So, how do you approach a situation like that, where you have clients who are kind of used to having an adversarial relationship, convincing them that you're different?
I don't try to convince them. I agree with them. Distribution is in most cases, an adversarial relationship. Distributors are working on really thin margins, and the suppliers don't necessarily understand that. And I think making that transparent to the supplier and them understanding your business model is key. If you try to guard that stuff, it's not good for anybody. If you understand their business and they understand your business, it breaks down the barriers, right? And then you're actionable on the things that you say that you're going to do. One of the big complaints is distributors say they're going to do something, and then they don't do it. So if you do what you say you're going to do, that's a pretty good relationship. They're around, right? They can come by the warehouse, they can come by the office. They call me, I pick up the phone, the brand managers, the sales managers, the salespeople. There's no barriers. And in a lot of distribution situations, they're not allowed to contact everybody. They're only allowed to contact one person. And that's not the situation. And so they quickly learn, though, they contact the people that can help them, right? Like they'll call me and I'll be like, I don't know, but how are you doing? How's your business? How are we doing for you? You're just being very human about the relationship. That's how we do it.
You mentioned more of like a sales and marketing than pure logistics. So tell me about getting to know the people you're selling wine for, and how you fit that role of sales and marketing. How do you understand the story, and how do you sort of distribute the story?
It starts kind of like what you're doing with me. We interview them, and we ask them what their goals are. What are your goals, and where do you want your wine seen, all the way down to where they want their wines placed. And then we facilitate that. and if they need counsel on our particular market, because a lot of people come from out of market, we're very open about where their wines will fit. Some people think their wines will fit here, and we're like, it'd be better if we went here with the wines. If you're trying to sell California Pinot Noir, which some people are still trying to sell California Pinot Noir in Oregon, we're like, maybe we should sell your Chardonnay. Or what if we sell twice as much of the Chardonnay and we just sold a little bit of the Pinot Noir? And that goes with every supplier, whether they're from France or Italy or Spain or Washington, really understanding where their wines fit in our market and in what channel they fit. Because everyone isn't going to want to be in grocery. Everyone isn't going to be in restaurants. Everyone isn't just going to want to be in catering and clubs, right? They what does their brand want to be? And we facilitate that. It's not what we want their brand to be. And I think that's where some distributors' winery relationships don't meld, right? The winery wants it's the winery's brand, not the distributor's brand.
You talked about the growth of the company as well. So tell me about the sort of the big steps in the last 8 years in terms of growth. Are there benchmarks you've hit, goals you've hit that were particularly momentous for you?
I would say that having full state distribution was a key benchmark for us. Oregon is a very difficult state to service because of its geography and the population between each spot. And one of our missions was to be a full state distributor, which we are now. That was a benchmark. And we have revenue benchmarks. We've hit those. The size of the business since 2008 we've grown 4x since then. That's been a big benchmark. I would say though that yes, we do use revenue as a success mark, but really it's more like a scorecard. I wouldn't call it a success, like just a success benchmark. It's a short-term marker. Building out our management team has been a big benchmark. Having enough brand managers to properly service the people that we represent is a big benchmark. Having a full-time sales manager and having a retail chain manager, and really building out the structure that would support a statewide distributor and really support the brands that we need to be a statewide distributor. Big benchmarks for us.
So with all that said, obviously a lot of growth the past couple of years. Tell me about how they've gone. How was 2020? What were the sort of adjustments you had to make going through the year, and what are the biggest sort of changes sort of in the company now versus say pre-pandemic?
That's like a vortex. The last 2 years has gone by pretty quick. It was something that none of us had faced, and we made very quick, decisive decisions. One of those was to maintain all of everyone at the wine group, but we had to restructure because, as you know, all the restaurants shut down. And so what we had to do is restructure the account base and to maintain our sales presence. That was the biggest change, and we've been building back the infrastructure back to a traditional distribution, sales, and marketing department since then. The business itself, fortunately for alcohol, was good, right? Did we create that? No. People were at home and they drank, and so business was good. And so, it's fortunate but unfortunate that the pandemic, from a business standpoint, presented challenges, but it also presented opportunities. What do they say? Don't waste a good crisis. And it was interesting. Pre-pandemic, if you remember, there was a thing, the tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that, that was like the tariffs and the pandemic. They just kind of was like this one big crisis. And right now, it's just everything's. The biggest change is it's not a crisis anymore. And so it's kind of we're getting back to business as usual. It's changed quite a bit. It's really challenging for the restaurants, even still, and so that's been a big change within the industry as how what the restaurant needs are.
Mm-hmm.
Groceries still their needs are still the same.
As a manager of people, tell me about dealing with 2020 specifically and 2021. How did you sort of handle the people working for you and as everybody's needs were sort of constantly changing?
Well, anyone that didn't have to be at the office went home, and they worked from home. And then the people that needed to be in the office because we were essential, people need their wine, stayed here. So, we really tried to manage that in a way that it didn't feel like some people had to be in the office and some people didn't. We really tried to educate on everyone. This is just keeping everybody safe. And unfortunately for the people that have to, salespeople and the warehouse people and the delivery people, the wine still has to go out the door. And so for them, it was nothing changed. Right, you had all these people working from home, and there was just some of us that had to keep the ship going, and we weren't able to do the team building that we normally do, but I think we just upped our communication, paid extra, that helped, and just listened to people and acted when they had needs. We were very, very flexible during that time.
You brought up earlier that one of the things you now sell is grapes. So tell us about the acquisition of what is now Threemile Vineyard and your role in it and what sort of what that experience has been like so far.
It kind of takes us back to David's vision was always to own property and have an agricultural portion, because we have Mitchell, Lewis, and Staver, which is the pump business, and the Mitchell Wine Group, which is wine distribution business. He wasn't necessarily looking just to plant vinifera. It could have been anything, and even prior to us acquiring the land out in the Dalles, there was always this undertone of looking for something. We were looking in the valley, we were looking in the Dalles, and David found the piece of property out in the Dalles, and if you saw it, you'd see why he made the decision. It's a beautiful piece of land, ideal to grow vinifera. And so we acquired that 110 acres. And after he acquired the property, he asked if I would like to be the general manager of the vineyard. And I was like, are you kidding me? Of course. What do I know about starting a vineyard? Really nothing. I worked at one, but I never oversaw putting one in. But fortunately, David had found a guy named Joe Cushman, which you guys have interviewed, and he's a third generation farmer. And we were able to get to work with him, and he knew how to put in a vineyard. And I just supported him and got him what he needed. And currently today, that is still my role. I'm a little more involved than that. But really, Joe runs the farm. I provide the structure around what he needs. And I do a lot of the sales and marketing, and so grape sales. But yeah, that's my role. I mean, really, what I'm finding is I'm kind of a true generalist. I like, I would say I know a lot about sales and marketing, and then maybe just some of the stuff for the rest of it, right? and I tend to jump to the things I'm interested in. And so with the farm, I tend to jump towards the things that I'm interested in, right? And it may be one day it may be grape sales, and the other day it may be, the biology of the plants, right? It's a massive learning curve for me. And I like the interaction with all the wineries too. It's a different relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we have this distribution relationship, but now we're kind of more in their camp, right? We're grape growers. And so it's a different conversation. So it's a different experience.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I'm curious, but now you have a product to sell to them. Mm-hmm. Tell me about finding interested parties and about kind of maintaining a relationship on that level as a supplier of product.
That part started with the grape selection. And another part of David's vision was, the Willamette Valley does an amazing job with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, and Riesling, and these cooler climate varietals. And out in the gorge where the Dalles are, out in the Dalles, it's a warm climate. There's not a lot of alternative varietals. And really the varietals are driving the demand, where you have winemakers that want to make something else other than Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. They want to offer something else to their client base. And that's really driving the demand in that experience. I also think being stewards and being organic and being inclusive and really partnering with people, that is also driving the demand, where we're an open book. You come out, tell you exactly what we're doing. We want your feedback. We want to follow you all the way through the winemaking process. Why was the wine good? Why was the wine not good? Maybe this varietal will work. Maybe it won't work. And have that collaborative experience. And people, they gravitate towards that. They feel as if they are part of the vineyard, which they are, because we're making decisions based off of what they're telling us. And so they really do have actual input into what we're going to do. And we're also providing a lot of information that they don't normally get. It's real-time weather data. It's real-time updates on all of the activities at the farm. And so short of being there, we're creating that data for them. Because driving out to the Dalles that's a haul.
Mm-hmm.
That's a haul. And so if they can see what's going on, mm-hmm. that's also driving that demand. They really appreciate that data.
So let's talk about the kind of looking ahead then a little bit for the various parts of your work. Let's start with, since we talk about Threemile, let's talk about Threemile. Mm-hmm. It's, it's just a few years of production now. What are you looking ahead for there in the Dalles and at the vineyard? Mm-hmm. And is there a thought on more of that kind of thing?
Yeah, so right now we have 18 varietals, and we're focused on understanding which varietals are appropriate for that site. We're pretty focused on that. We also just acquired an additional 100 acres next door, and we are focused on expanding our acreage, plantable acreage. So those are two things that we're very focused on right now at Threemile. In the future, it's the same cycle. Which varietals are working, and how do we farm each one of those to its potential? Because when you have that much diversity, it's a lot of trial and error.
What about with Mitchell Wine Group? What comes next here?
We still want to grow, so we can provide better service and coverage. We still have gaps in our portfolio that we would like to fill, that will meet our mission, and just to continue to build out a very, very strong team.
So you talked about kind of your earlier, the initial impressions of Oregon wine and of learning it. Tell me about the changes you've seen in the industry from then to now, and how does the industry look to you now as you kind of look at it in 2022?
Well, when I first got into the wine industry, if you went into a grocery store, there was maybe 30 or 40 feet of wine, and now there's 100 feet of wine, and every end base has, a 50 case display and a 100 case rounder. So it went from, we offer this to bam, it's front and center. And then just the growth of the Oregon wine industry in general. I mean, you just drive 99. It was just row crop and trees on the hillsides, and now it's vinifera, and the economy comparatively is booming. For a hard to get to place, it's great. The buying and the decision making, has changed over time. It's getting to, before it was more on-site purchasing, and now it's getting to be more centralized, which is a kind of a natural progression. Unfortunate, but natural. That's been a big change.
What about as you look ahead for Oregon wine? What comes next for the industry?
I mean, from a distribution perspective, I continue to see Oregon wine grow in our backyard and nationally. The quality that we're seeing coming out of Oregon is spectacular. To watch over the years and to taste the wines, not that there weren't great wines before, but they're just keep getting better and better and better. And with the investment in all of the wineries in Chardonnay, I just think that we are going to continue to be a destination and what the world is going to be looked at for an emerging region. I see a very bright future for Oregon wine. Yeah.
Is there anything as you look ahead that concerns you particularly?
I mean, consolidation always concerns me because I think that consolidation it hampers quality and diversity. That's concerning to me. And again, that's a natural progression, but that doesn't mean that we have to go down that path.
And what about looking ahead for yourself and your future? What comes next for you, either in wine or elsewhere?
As long as we're sticking to the mission and vision, we're going to keep doing what we're doing today. We're going to keep growing the wine group. We're going to create experiences for people, and just be the premier wholesaler in the state of Oregon, the Northwest. We'll get there.
Your ambitions change mid-sentence sometimes. Yeah. Last question for you. You mentioned you took a very interesting route into the industry. If you were giving someone advice or words of wisdom on joining the Oregon wine industry in some way, what would you tell them?
I would say that if you are going to start from scratch and start a winery, learn how to sell the wine first. I would say that is it's a very difficult part of the business. Not that the winemaking and operations of it are not, but really understand your business model going into it and understanding how you're going to sell your wine and how you're going to position your brand. If you were going to get into distribution, I would say work at a couple of different distributors. If you're really interested in wholesale, you're going to want to work for a couple different distributors.
Why is that?
They offer different experiences and different expertise, and it'll tell you what you want to do within the wholesale wine business. The wholesale wine business is there's so many different things that you can do, in the wine business in wholesale. Right? You can be completely immersed in wine, or you can be completely immersed in the business end of it, or the operational, or finance, or human resources, or IT. And you still get to be tied to the wine business. I would say work for a few places, even work for a winery. Maybe if you're going to work in wine, find your passion within the wine industry. Wine doesn't necessarily have to be your passion, but I find it's what keeps people in the business. Whether you're at Southern Wine and Spirits, or you're at a winery, or you're at Mitchell Wine Group, I find that it's what keeps you in the game.
All right. All the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to cover?
No. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time and hospitality in this
of course.
beautiful space, and let you off the hook.
Yeah. Thank you.